Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Well-Appointed Mystic. Today, I wanted to sort of talk through my favorite decks that I used in 2025. These aren't necessarily decks that were released in 2020 or 2024. Good grief, I don't even know what year it is. So these are not necessarily decks that were released in 2024. Some were new this year, but some were new to me this year, and I'm pretty sure these are all new to me this year, and were decks that I used in my monthly, like, sort of daily draw tarot and oracle combos. And I'm not going to go through all 12 months because some months I did more than one deck combo, so I don't want us to be here forever, but I did want to sort of talk about the ones that were the biggest surprises for me, and the ones that sort of had, like, the months where I felt like I got the most out of the readings. And so that's sort of where I'm going to go with this. And I wanted to sort of talk through this because as a tarot card reader and a collector, I really got into it about 3 years ago, and what I was doing was essentially making up for lost time. I didn't realize that there was this giant online community of tarot card readers, and so when I discovered, I really did double time to make up for lost time, and just get a hold of all of these decks that I didn't know had existed before that. So, like a lot of people, I started reading tarot in my early 20s, and I dabbled, I think is probably the best way to describe it, because I didn't have a network of people or anyone around me who was also reading tarot cards, and it wasn't necessarily something that when I met somebody new, I'd be like, hey, do you read tarot cards? Today I might do that, but back in the early aughts, that wasn't necessarily a great icebreaker conversation starter with people. So it wasn't until 2020s that I discovered that there was this whole tarot community online, and there were all these new decks and just so much. So I went in with both feet and probably bought way more decks than I should have. And so starting probably about a little over a year ago, I made a point of picking a deck each month to do my daily card draws and focus on one particular deck, and decided that this was the best way for me to sort of slowly work through the many decks that I had purchased where I wasn't necessarily doing, it didn't seem, how do I put this? It didn't seem effective to pick up a different deck every day and read from it, when I still feel so new to reading, especially some of the decks that sway way further away from a traditional Rider-Waite-Smith. And so, like just randomly picking up a deck every day and reading from it, I felt like I wasn't going to get better at reading, because that would be mostly just spending my time looking at guidebooks and trying to sort all that out. So focusing on one deck became really helpful for me, because it meant that I could spend time with one, figure out sort of the vision and direction of the artist and creator of the deck, and kind of really get to know it and how it resonated with me. And since I don't really read for other people, my daily draw is kind of the most frequent reading that I do. Occasionally I will do a week ahead or a month ahead spread, or I'll have a specific question and go into it. But I have often turned my daily draws into, what am I dealing with today, and using it more as a single question and doing a maybe 3-card kind of scenario to sort of answer those questions. So, but still using just one deck for that month. And yes, it can be frustrating, because if I got 2 new decks in a given month, or I think one month I got 9 decks in, and the urge to jump in and start with a new deck that just showed up and it was really exciting to use, I think spending a month focusing on one deck, or in some, it's like for October, because it's spooky month and I wanted to play with all my spooky decks, I did a different deck each week, which worked out okay, but probably was a bit much. I probably should have focused more specifically on one deck, one tarot, one oracle. And for November, I did one set of decks for the beginning of the month, like for the first 2 weeks, and then one deck for the last 2 weeks. And it was another case where I really wanted to try out a deck and discovered that maybe that wasn't the best deck for me for the first 2 weeks, which made me not want to do my daily readings. And I probably should have just cut my losses like you do with a book you don't like and just DNF it and switch to the other pairing sooner, because basically what I did was I just didn't do my readings until the 2 weeks was up so I could skip it. But also, there was a lot of other stuff going on in the world. But anyway, so what I'm going to do is turn the camera around and I will go through some of my decks, like the decks that I used that were most impactful for me for 2025. So maybe that's what the title will be. So anyway, catch you in a second. Okay, we're back. So the first deck that I wanted to talk about was the Wild Unknown Pocket Archetypes. I have the full-sized edition and I bought the pocket size when it was released. And what I discovered was that this was easier for me to get into because, one, I can actually hold the cards in my hand. The full-size ones, the cards are so big, I can't actually do anything with them. My hands are so small that I literally, probably the only way I could shuffle them was if I'd laid them on a table and did one of these things. So the smaller deck all of a sudden made this accessible to me at some level, and discovered that what I enjoyed doing with this deck was to actually just pull an archetype card for the week. And I believe that there's a comment somewhere, I think, in the guidebook, and I actually like the little tiny guidebook. I don't mind that the type is really small. I have the full-size edition and I kept the book for the full size out so that if I wanted to refer to it more easily I could. But honestly, the fact that all of this fits in this tin and I can leave it on my bedside table just makes me use it more often than I was the full-sized edition. And so I will pull basically an archetype card for the week that's just sort of a focal energy kind of thing or something that I need to think about, and I'll just put that card up on my bedside table, which is sort of my mini altar, and just it gives me an opportunity to sort of ruminate on something and think things through. So if you're not familiar with this deck, which I'm sure at this point everyone is, they are all sort of archetypes, and they're divided up into different types of archetypes. And so some of them I like the dead end, so some of them I guess are more like conceptual archetypes versus like people archetypes. The cave, the creator, the destroyer, Alethea, the siren, the stone, the riddle. So they could be like any type of archetype. So it's an interesting deck, and I found that I am more inclined to use it and learn a bit more about the messages and the archetypes. And I have never been a huge user of Kim Krantz's decks. As much as I think that they're beautiful and interesting, they just hadn't ever really resonated with me. And I found that the pocket archetypes is one that I can actually sort of dig into. And so it sort of falls into two categories. Something that really has surprised me because I wasn't sure, like when I bought this pocket edition, I was like, this is it. If this doesn't work, then I'm just getting rid of them. I'm just not a Kim Krantz person. And what I've discovered is that this has really opened up that channel for me in a way that I wasn't expecting. So I may go back and try some of Kim Krantz's other decks as a result of working with this one. So next up, we'll talk about I did not use these two decks together, but I do think that they probably sit pretty nicely. This is the Anima Mundi, and this is a deck that very early on when I started back into tarot a few years ago, I picked it up. It's by Weyerweeden is her last name, Megan. And it was a deck that when I got it, I was still too new. It was too much for somebody at my level, and so I immediately rehomed it, which was a very impulsive thing for me to do. And so I repurchased it this year, and I'm really glad that I did, because it is actually a beautiful deck. And now that I feel more knowledgeable, it's made it so that it's an easier reader for me, and I have just really enjoyed working with it. And then this other deck is the Mushroom Oracle, which is another deck that is less of a surprise for me, because when I saw it, I was like, these are all the things that I love. The sort of vintage imagery, the interesting collage work, the keywords right on the card. Like, I just think it's a wonderful deck. And I have since acquired all of the other decks from the Broccoli magazine sort of shop. So I also have the seashell, and which I'll talk about in a minute, and the flowers. And I think there's another one coming out. Maybe it's a crystals deck. I'm not sure. But yeah, I was surprised at, as much as I thought it was a beautiful deck, I was surprised at what a great reader it is. And the messaging is really good. So it's just been, both of these have made me really happy. And just have been really engaging. They're such beautiful decks. The coloring is great. So these were two of my favorites. And if I haven't said it already, what I'm showing here, despite being sort of my favorite decks for this year, are not in any particular order. They're in whatever order they're sitting here on my table. It's not like a hierarchy thing. So I don't know that I could put one above another one in terms of like, this one was my absolute favorite. Some just resonated with me in different ways at different times. But both of these were super successful for me in terms of reading. And I actually think in the future I might use these two together, because I did actually use the Anima Mundi with, I believe, I don't even remember which deck I mixed it with. But yeah, so this is the Mushroom Oracle and the Anima Mundi Tarot. And again, I don't think either one of these decks, I know Anima Mundi is not a new deck for 2024, but it was new-ish to me in 2024. So, okay, one of the big surprises for me for this year was I finally got into MJ Cullinan's decks. Now, this is another creator like Kim Krantz that when I first got back into tarot was absolutely the decks that people were always posting about on Instagram and on, you know, on all the social medias and everything. And I purchased the Urban Crow pretty early on and liked it, but hadn't really worked with it. And then anyone will recognize the back of the Guardian of the Night. It was frequently used in Instagram posts and everything. But my initial reaction when I started using, like just flipping through these in person, was some of the art gets a little squishy. I don't know how else to describe it, but there's just sort of that, like, you know, like squishing in the paint or in a photo editing program to sort of blend things in a certain way that was distracting for me. I'm not saying that the artwork wasn't lovely or the compositions or the colors, but just I would get really distracted with the smudginess of the images, and I was like, I don't know that I'm going to be able to read with these. And then I finally, one of the things is I cut the borders off of the Guardian of the Night tarot, and that made all the difference for me. I think once I was just focusing on the images and not the big border and everything, also made the deck smaller because these are both Hay House decks, and so it was the same size as the Urban Crow Oracle and sort of the standard Hay House Oracle size. So trimming this made all the difference, and I was less bothered. Like, this is an example where you can kind of see, like, I don't know if you can actually see how the artwork just looks, it just bothered me a little bit, but everything about this composition and the elements that are added in here carry it in a way that I wasn't expecting, and so I've ended up really enjoying it. I also like the guidebooks are really good. And so where my initial thought was that the artwork, like this is another one where it doesn't look like fur on this. It just looks like somebody did the like smudge tool in Photoshop. But the composition and the details, the bunnies, the fox, like all of this, and there's details in the guidebook about oftentimes about the animals that are used and what their symbolism is. That also helped me to understand that I am actually quite moved by animal decks in a way that I wasn't expecting. I mean, I shouldn't be surprised. I tend to like animals better than most people anyway. So I should have expected that. But I feel like animals in tarot are a great way to step outside of a lot of the constraints that get associated once you put people into the imagery. And while I love beautiful vintage paintings and antique paintings and things like that, there's not a lot of representation there, where when you see a crow or a fish or, you know, some other animal, it can be anyone. It can stand in for anybody, male or female, any color, from any culture. For me, they work better. And, you know, that is something that was a huge discovery for me, was that I really like animal decks. And I'm surprised because my instinct originally was for a lot of sort of vintage people-y decks, and then also like floral and botanical decks. But the more I work with animal related decks, I mean, I showed the Anima Mundi, and now this is the Guardian of the Night and the Urban Crow, like definitely an animal vibe going on here. And so I have even more animal decks to show. So clearly this is a direction that I'm taking. But so my big surprise for me was that I have become more of a fan of the MJ Cullinan decks in a way that I wasn't expecting. There's one other deck I think that she had. Well, there's a couple other decks, but there was one other deck that I had that I still can't figure out how I'm going to work with, because it has just some really giant borders that bother me, and I can't figure out how to cut them off without it looking like they've been chopped in a bad way. So I might try to work with that one next year and try to figure something out. So while we're talking about animal decks, let's talk about the Bee Tarot. So this was another deck that I heard everybody talking about it. This was a deck that was released in 2024. I heard everybody talking about it. Everyone was so excited about it. And I just wasn't sure it was going to be a deck that resonated with me, partially because there's some illustration qualities. Like, I love the animal illustrations. Again, this may be an animal people thing for me. I wasn't sure I was going to like them. And then there's others that I really like. This guy just absolutely drenched in honey is quite lovely. But what I ended up discovering is that I really like this deck, and I was surprised at how much I liked it. I liked a lot of the messaging that was associated with the guidebook, talking through sort of the different symbolism in the deck. And to me, there's a lot of similarity between this deck and the Witch's Garden, which is also a Llewellyn deck. Very similar card stock. With both have the sort of linen texture, and the color schemes are quite similar. And so I think I used this for a couple of weeks, and then I switched to the Witch's Garden, like maybe in September. And as much as I think the Witch's Garden deck is beautiful and absolutely stunning, I found that I was getting better messages, or more thoughtful messages for me. And it might have just been the time of year or something like that. But the Bee Tarot was giving me more of the kind of messaging that I needed. Now, this might all change. If I pull this deck for, summer of 2025, I might have totally different feelings and readings from it. But it came to me at the right time and gave me sort of the right vibe. So this was the B Tarot. And again, I bought it. I think I bought it because Llewellyn was having a sale, because I wasn't sure I was going to really like it, and have ended up really, really liking it, and was very happy that I went ahead and purchased it. So the next surprise for me was the Mermaid Tarot. And so this summer I decided that I was going to, I wanted a water, like everybody was talking about water themed decks and doing something with sort of water, you know, beachy, ocean kind of vibes. And so I went through and I, you know, there aren't a lot of sort of mermaid or water themed tarot decks. There's a couple, but I was having a hard time finding one that felt like it was sort of the right vibe for me. So I finally just took, again, this was a case where I took a chance on a deck and I wasn't sure if it was going to work for me, but this is the Mermaid Tarot, and this is the Seashell Oracle. This is another one from Broccoli. This is from Llewellyn. And what I ended up discovering was I really like these. So much so that I went ahead and got the Mermaid Magic book and worked through probably more than half of the book, which talked about each type of mermaid and sort of gave magic, like meditations and writing prompts and even some spells to do in relation to sirens, mermaids, like all these kinds of things, are sort of leaning into that energy. So it was just, that whole month was just full of ocean and mermaid energy, which is great because I live in the middle of the country where we do not have oceans. We don't even have very big lakes. We might have a couple of rivers, but so it gave me an opportunity to sort of get in touch with that sort of watery feel. The artwork is beautiful. These worked great together. And I did actually also use the Sisters of the Sea Oracle deck with this as well. So I was actually pulling 3 different cards each day, 2 Oracle and at least 1 Tarot. And they worked beautifully together. And I was really surprised because aesthetically they're a little different, but really good messages. Like I said, the Broccoli oracles, their messaging is fantastic. I love that the keywords are right here. The symbolism on the Mermaid Tarot has some differences, but is clear enough that you don't necessarily need to get into the guidebook if you don't want to. I love that the swords suit, I believe, is all like Arctic. So I feel like this is even a deck that could be used in the winter months, or if you live in a colder climate, that kind of thing, because it really shows those energy, like this wands with the fiery volcano energy, just really fantastic. So really happy with both of these decks. And again, was very surprised because I wasn't sure if these were going to work for me. Like if they were like a mermaid deck, if it was going to be too gimmicky. But it is actually a great reader and really touched me in a way that I was not expecting. So while we're talking about more animal related things, I grabbed a copy of the Wisdom, was this Everyday Witches Familiars Oracle. So this is Witches Familiars. So again, more animals. This was Deborah Blake. It goes along with the rest of the Everyday Witch collection. There's an Everyday Witch Oracle, Everyday Witch Tarot, and then this is the Witches Familiars. And this, again, I feel like maybe it's time for me to admit, like, I definitely relate more to animals, I guess, than people in a lot of cases. But this was, I love this deck because not only does it include an animal on each one, and it is kind of any kind of animal that tends to be associated with witchcraft and magic and that kind of thing, but it also includes for each, their suits. So it gives just a slightly different opportunity to read these, because you can lean into that even without keywords or anything on here. Hawk and fire, you know, can kind of quickly give you some idea of, you know, are you hunting? like you've got that forward motion energy, you're seeking something out. He's got all this. And I'm just, again, this is me just being intuitive about this. The guidebook is lovely and is super helpful, but being able to just look at these cards, again, rooster for fire, like that is a, sort of that, it's almost like an Ace of Wands kind of energy, like a get up and go kind of feeling just from looking at it. So I feel like sometimes I don't even need the guidebook for these. I really do get an immediate hit from these. The spirit cards are great. So there's earth, air, fire, and water. And then there's just a handful of spirit cards, which are like dragon, phoenix, that kind of thing. So I was surprised how much I like this deck. I really wasn't expecting. I thought it was more just completing a collection for me than it ended up being like a working deck. And again, this is a case where the Witch's Familiar Oracle, I tend to pull a card from it when I feel like I need animal support. And like I said, I guess I'm more of an animal person than a people person. So like picking this up and just grabbing it and being like, today I need animal energy. What do I need? I need otter energy, And for me, that like immediately is like, I need to, like, I know that otters are creatures that sort of mate for life, and they tend to sort of work in colonies and are very playful. So it's like knowing that, like, if this is the energy that I need, like, do I need to spend some time just my husband and I playing, like maybe we play video games tonight, or we just sit and have a good laugh, and but just that sort of community and lightheartedness. So that's been very helpful for me. Again, very anxious human. I often need the wisdom of the animals, as it were. And so, okay, so my last two have been the decks that I have been working with at the end of November. And the first is the Heartwood Tarot, which I had been holding off using because I really wanted to spend time with it. I didn't just want to flip through it and sort of use it hurdy-gurdy. And the Oracle deck is the Green Witch's Oracle. It's this one. We have a visitor, or 3. So this is the Green Witch's Oracle. So this deck, when I first got it, I was very temperamental about it. I was a big fuss bucket because the way that oh my gosh, I wasn't kidding when I said there was 3 of them. They have all arrived. I apologize for the noise. I'm sure they're going to knock everything over and I have to re-record this whole video. So I was really fussy when I first got the Green Witch Oracle deck because there wasn't a real clear categorization, and there weren't, like, when you look at, there's an index in the back of the book, which is the only way to look up the quickest way, I guess, to look up the meanings and the descriptions of each of the cards. But the way that it's laid out is like there's snow, fog, spring, summer, autumn, winter. Somewhere I think there's rain as well, but like there were like 2 or 3 herbs and 2 or 3 crystals, and I wasn't sure sort of the goal, but once I started using it, I think what I came up with is that it's more important the range of messaging that is in this deck rather than the range of Green Witch elements, elementals, that kind of thing. So I have ended up loving this deck and I have used it several months. It's probably been my most used Oracle deck. I did paint the edges black to match the backs, which I think is really nice. And then the Heartwood, which is one of the 3 Trees decks. And I mean, every time I even pick this deck up, I just get warm fuzzies from it. This little mouse on the back of the card backs just is all of that. One of my favorite book as a child was Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of Nim. And I even made a little, like, other people had like doll houses. I made basically Mrs. Frisbee's house. So I had little stuffed mice, and the little stuffed mice I made, like I used a shoebox and I got little pieces of fabric to make blankets and beds and little things. And that was my, like, so the fact that the main character, the fool in the Heartwood, is a mouse, is 100% like done. I love it. So we're good. So anyway, so these were the 2 decks I've been using, and the guidebook for the Heartwood is great. It is only available as a PDF, so it can be a little bit challenging to use. So I've been relying on my intuition mostly, and then I will refer back to the guidebook and see if there's any hints that I missed along the way. The more that I use this Green Witch's Oracle, the more I become aware of the little tiny details. So while this is the card for lavender, there is a heart charm. There's a clear quartz crystal. This looks like maybe aquamarine. So like there's other things in here that can be reference points. So just so good. So good. I have really enjoyed working with both of these decks. I'm so glad that is what I've been working with the last couple of weeks, because like I said earlier this month, I worked with a couple of decks that just were not hitting for me. And so being able, like, I think it would have been worse if I had ended on a low note, but instead I'm sort of ending the month on a high note. So these are just such beautiful cards, and the illustrations on the Heartwood are just, it's like falling into a storybook, and that has just been just what I needed this month. So I think if anything with my complaints, my initial complaints with the Green Witch Oracle deck is I would like them to just do a second volume and offer more crystals and more herbs, and just sort of so we can flush out the deck a little bit. I know that it's a decent sized deck to begin with. I want to say it's maybe 50 cards. Let me see. Of course, I managed to jam the box. Don't ever do this. Don't ever put the box inside. Anyway, it's a decent sized deck. And, but to create that range where if you really wanted to focus specifically on herbs, you could. But overall, I've had really good readings with this deck, and it's just been really thoughtful. And look at my little mousy friend. He's so sweet. I think it just touches my my little animal heart, I guess. Strength, facing that snake. So these were, I wouldn't say so Green Witch's Oracle was definitely a surprise for me because I was such a fuss bucket when I originally unpackaged it. But I'm so glad that it has become a deck that I really, really like. And while the Heartwood was not a surprise to me that I fell in love with it, I do recall when they announced that it would be available that I was not inclined to buy it initially because I had the Oak, Ash, and Thorn, and I was like, well, I have a deck that's really similar. I don't really need this one. And then I don't know what happened. I don't know if I watched a walkthrough, but I was finally like, no, I think I'm going to go ahead and order it. And I am so glad that I did. If anything, if I had to rank them, I think I'd put the Heartwood above the Oak, Ash, and Thorn, as much as I love the Oak, Ash, and Thorn, particularly the fact that one whole suit, I think the cups, is all squirrels with like acorns as their little cups. I mean, it's like my soul animal, so of course I love it. But this also just hits that fantastic. I've been getting so many messages across the board about keeping my sense of wonder and exploration and curiosity, and I feel like this deck is the deck that helps me to look for those things with cards like this. The Knight of Swords, and he's looking out between the books to see the trees. Like, it is like walking into a storybook fantasy. And so it really has, I mean, it's touching that part of me that needs that sense of wonder and sense of magic. So those are my decks that most surprised me in 2024. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, subscribe, leave comments. Let me know what was the biggest surprise for you in 2024. What was your favorite decks or the most used? So anyway, thanks so much. I'll talk to you guys again soon.